Before we get into today's episode, I have a very exciting announcement to share with all of you. On Sunday, March 9th, to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of the show, we are launching myfirstmarathonpodcast.com. To give you an idea of what to expect, you're going to find free first marathon resources, monthly blog posts, solo episodes breaking down concepts from our guest episodes, and a paid community with extended episodes, bonus content, and more to come. The first two exclusive guest Q&As coming out on the paywall side of the website are with at Dr. Lisa DPT and Nicole from at Below Average Running. We answered your burning questions and did a little rapid fire true false segment that you won't want to miss. Our paid community is only $5 a month, and my goal is to give you a whole lot of bang for your buck, so I'm really excited to see you there. Make sure you follow at My First Marathon Pod on Instagram and TikTok for updates, and without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast, where we interview runners in all stages of their running careers about their first marathon experiences to prove to you that anyone can run a marathon. My name is Taylor, and today's runner is a fellow podcaster who recently ran his first marathon at the 2024 New York City Marathon. We dig into how his relationship with running started with an amazing high school cross-country coach who helped him realize that running can truly be a space for peace in life. After 10 years of running off and on, he spectated a friend at the New York City Marathon and knew from that moment that he was going to run it too. His training was derailed by an injury, causing him to miss peak training weeks, so we get into how he was able to bounce back from a setback in training as well. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. Please welcome the host of the Super Awesome Runner podcast, Sam. Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show this weekend. Happy Saturday. How's your weekend off to so far?
Happy Saturday. It's going really well. I actually have a 10K race tomorrow morning, in fact. Yeah, which I'm pretty excited for. I'm coming off of an injury, though, so my plan is to just finish the 10K. I'm not going for any PRs.
Sometimes those are the best races. If coming off an injury, just take it easy, do your thing.
Yeah,
sounds
totally.
good. Cool. So excited to talk to you this weekend. We connected because you also have a podcast as well. So excited to kind of get into how that all made its way into your life. But let's just start from the beginning. How'd you get introduced to movement, to running? How did this journey all kind of start for you?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it's kind of at least funny in my head. It started because I needed a PE credit to graduate high school, and I was in my junior year at this point. So obviously only 2 more years left. And that's when I realized that, oh no, like I'm not going to be able to graduate. You need at least 3, and I had 0.
Oh,
so that meant, and in the 4 remaining semesters, I had to somehow scrape together 3 credits. And so it was the summer before my junior year started. I literally pulled out we had a version of our course book and looking at all the different sports and activities that I could do. And I never considered myself to be an athletic kid. I was in front of computers, playing video games, N64, all that kind of stuff. And so the thought of joining a sports team or doing anything at all athletic was oh my gosh. So, I don't know who that version of me would be.
Sure.
So I saw cross country, and in my head, I was like, well, running it's running, right? I could run, at the very least. I don't need to catch anything or throw anything. And I was really worried about hand-eye coordination. So that felt like the most accessible thing. So I signed up for cross country. I was absolutely the slowest kid on there. I was so out of my depth, and I don't even remember if I wore the right kind of shoes. I certainly wasn't wearing the clothing that we wear today to go out on runs, right? It's so technical.
Sure,
I think
yeah.
It really was just an oversized cotton shirt and whatever sneakers I had,
Yeah.
But what was really nice about it, and looking back, I could see how it planted a seed in me, obviously that grew to marathoning eventually. But we had a really great coach. In very typical kind of public school, my coach was also the golf coach and everything. And I think golf was more his passion. And so he was really chill with the cross country team. And he would actually do a lot of the runs with us, which I really respected, because his philosophy was, if I'm going to ask you to do it, I should be able to do it too. And I think that he just made it much more accessible to me. And I wasn't as afraid to kind of be the slowest kid or the kid that didn't, fit the part, so to speak. And as those runs kind of extended and got longer, I don't know, I just found kind of a comfort in it. It really did plant something in me of just hey, you can do this. You might not be as unathletic as you think. And I had no idea at the time, but that really was the actual beginning of my whole running career.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I haven't heard so much from like a team sport or an individual sport from high school where like running wasn't a punishment. Like most of the time we
Right.
hear running coming off is a punishment, and that's why we end up having these like weird relationships with it when we are adults and trying to get into running. So that's really cool that you had that seed like so early on. Do you feel like if you had a different experience, like it would have been a totally different running start for you?
Yeah, I'm certain that that would have happened. It's funny. So I, again, I told you I needed 3 credits, so that was my one. And by the end of it, I really enjoyed it. I was ready to sign back up for next year's cross country, but then they changed the coach. And I remember, so it was the
Mm,
summer now before my senior year, and I get a call from this new coach I've never met before. And he was like giving me warm ups and drills and like all the things that any normal coach is going to do because he wants to have a good team. And it freaked me out. So I ended up not signing up for it my senior year because I was
yeah.
like, whoa, whoa, slow your roll. That's too much for me. Like I again just was very comfortable with like the chill vibe running, just like being out there in the quiet and everything. I grew up in Austin, Texas, which is very hilly. So to this day, I actually love hills, and I think it's because that's 99% of our workouts were hill repeats,
Yeah.
um, and so I got really used to them. But yeah, I think because of just getting freaked out by that second, much more serious coach, I think that the first one really did help kind of make it again, just make it feel accessible and like something I could actually do.
Totally. Yeah. So that's great that you had that experience and you at least had that seed in you, even if you didn't sign up your senior year. And then
Yeah.
how did we go from there? Like how did running creep its way back into your life after that that coach?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I had a very much like on off relationship, I'd say, with running for the next really 10 to 15 years.
Mm,
It wasn't anything that I ever formally signed back up to do, and I wasn't racing at all really up until graduate school, basically. So through college and yeah, leading up to me going to graduate school, it was just kind of something that I would do sometimes. Whatever moment, or if I just felt like I wanted to do something physical, or I just needed to get out of my head or move a little bit, I would just again throw on sneakers, head out, and go for a run. And this was like long before Strava and anything was tracked, and none of the stats or whatever. And so I don't remember how far I was running. I don't remember what my pace was. None of that thing. It was just a very natural little moment of like, oh, I'm going to go for a run, and I just that was that. Um, but then when I moved, so I mentioned graduate school. I got into that. They had a gym with a nice little track, so I started to kind of get a little bit more into that. And I think again, it was a reaction to just how intense graduate school was. So I
mm,
needed something again to just like decompress and feel a little bit more relaxed. So I started running on the track, and then I noticed that Dallas had a because I was in Dallas now, had a marathon that they do, which they also split where you could run the half marathon. So I think it was the Rock and Roll series of marathons, and it was in Dallas. And I thought, sure, I'll sign up for a half. And I very distinctly remember I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a training program. I was just like kind of running, and I would just pick a random mileage that week or that day to go running. And I'd work my way up to like 5 or 6 miles only. And it was a week out from running my first half. And I thought, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to do this. So literally, I think the Thursday before the Saturday run, I went out and ran like 9 miles, which is a
yeah.
horrible idea to do. Right? Like looking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. But in my head, it was a very logical thing because I was like, well, if I can run 9 miles today, like
Yeah,
I
I
could
could run
probably get to
13.
13.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Like no sense whatsoever about like glycogen and, muscle fatigue or anything like
Sure.
that. So I lined up, and I was very lucky because actually a business school colleague of mine was running the full, and the courses are the same for the first 9 miles. So
Oh,
I was actually
nice.
able to run for the first 9 with her, which was really fun. And then the last 4 were like, oh my gosh, what a trek, right? Like, you hit a wall, I think, in a half marathon, same as you do in a full, usually
Totally.
around 10, right? And so those last like 3 or 4 miles were a drag, but I crossed. I think my time was like 2:32. Um, and then it was super fun. But then once again, after I'd done that, I just kind of left running for many many years, and I didn't think anything of it. And I spent a couple years, you know, back and forth with whether or not I wanted to keep running. And then ended up being a spin instructor, funny enough, because my friend was like, well, why don't you come to a spin class if you're looking for cardio, but you don't want to run anymore, especially in Texas where it's like hot 10 months out of the year and it can be
Right,
really
right.
miserable.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, sure, I'll take a dark AC run room with fans like directly on
It's
me.
sure.
And I loved it. I loved it so much as a writer, loud music. This was in that era of like peak Soul Cycle and all the clones and everything. So this was like a locally owned studio. Became a writer. I was going sometimes twice a day, most days out of the week, and then eventually transitioned to trying out and becoming an instructor. And so I spent like 3 or 4 years on the bike, which was a lot of fun. And that again, I think the reason that helped me reach, eventually a marathoner was just the realization that I could move and I could enjoy movement, and I really liked fitness and I liked being in the fitness culture. That was like very important to me. So, anyways, that was a lot of fun. And I wasn't running for a while. Moved to New York. I live in the city now. I'm in Manhattan, and a friend of mine from work, he was running his 5th New York City marathon, and I thought, great, I'm going to go out and cheer for him. Like New York City, as I'm sure you know, it's like just a holiday here, right? Like
Yeah,
it
oh
really is.
totally.
It's like, yeah, it's like a cultural
City
event.
shuts
It's really
down.
special.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's so fun. So I was like, sure, yeah, I'm gonna go, watch this thing that happens. And I saw him run by. It was his 5th one in a row. I think now he's up to like 7 or 8, and he's
Oh
he's
wow, good for
almost in
him.
that streaking club, the 15ers,
Yeah.
which is super cool. But yeah, like just something clicked in my head. I saw him run by. He was on Fifth Avenue near the end. It was like mile 22 or 23, and I literally just something was like, I'm gonna do that. Like it all just came together in that moment. And so I signed up for my first race with New York Roadrunners as part of the 9+1, and then just kind of it accelerated from there. And I got so addicted to it, and it really is like all those memes where it's like on the day one runner again, not knowing what shoes to wear, what clothes to wear, to like the day 200 runner, and you're like in full loot like Nike or Bandit gear or Tracksmith or whatever, and you've got your glasses and your gels and all that stuff. And so I am in it for real now.
I love it. I love that transition too, because it happens like you don't even know it. You blink and then you're there. You're that kind of runner.
Exactly.
But that's cool. So your journey, yeah, I thank you for breaking that all down. So I wanted to kind of go back to when you said that every time in your life that you felt like you like were stressed or you had something kind of turbulent going on, or like something that was kind of throwing you off your course, you would always go back to running. What do you think it was about running at that time that like brought you peace? And then how did it feel like when you would go out and run after having like a stressful day, do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's not something I've put a lot of thought into actually, but I think it's, now when I go for a run, I find a lot of calm, because I certainly, like many of us, spend my day in front of a screen reading things all day long or consuming videos, or, like you go from like, as I've seen memes, you go from your tiny screen to your medium screen to then your TV screen,
Yeah,
like, and you're just consuming, 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 and it's exhausting, quite frankly. Our brains get tired. So I think what I really find calming about running is that it is truly a screen-free time. If you don't count your watch that you might glance at every now and then. But it was, I think, for me at that time, just a way to, I was running with music, so just put on a playlist that I like, and then just lose myself to the music and to the beat and to the environment. And I was almost exclusively running outside, like in neighborhoods. And so I just think that time away from kind of, it felt like you were like stepping away from your life for a time period, like kind of hitting pause
yeah.
on your life and getting to spend an hour or two just enjoying your, like the space around you, the nature around you, whatever that might be.
Totally. Yeah. And like you said, it gets you outside too. I think there's so much to, like you were talking about, screens and constantly being on our phones and our TVs and our tablets, whatever we're on, and getting like a chance to, yeah, step out of your own brain, kind of zone out for a little bit, so to speak. And then also like be really connected with outside nature, being outside, like moving outside. It's definitely got benefits in a couple different areas.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. And then yeah, so decided to do 9+1. That's awesome. So 9+1 is I've talked to a couple people that have done it, but it sounds like it kind of forces you, if this is your first marathon that you're training for, it forces you into consistency like really quickly. So how did your routine shift? Like what did you have a strategy for which races you were going to sign up for, and what like duration you were going to do, or how much time you're going to give yourself off in between? Like what did all that look like?
Yeah, for sure. It that first year that I did it, now I'm in my like third year of doing it, the 9+1 dance, if you will. So my first year, very similar to how I first started running, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just signing up for races that were coming up that sounded good. So The New York City Marathon's in November. That was November 2022, I believe, when I saw my friend run, and I wanted to do it myself. And I just, I signed up first for a 4 miler and then a 10K. And I actually saw the Fred Lebo half, which just happened this past weekend, which is a half marathon in Central Park. And I thought, okay, I could do that. It's been a minute since I've done a half marathon, but I bet I could. So I dove right into kind of, very little mileage into training for a half marathon again. And this time, though, I thought, you know what, I'm going to actually look this up because I don't want to hurt myself. I'm much older than I was when I was in business school all those years ago. And so I at least had like the inkling of a training program that I did pretty well with. And I did all my training runs in Central Park, which honestly, as I tell people, the only thing, in my opinion, missing from Central Park is altitude, because otherwise you get everything that you need from like a good racing or training program. There's so many hills. They are relentless. And so, yeah, I spent some, a lot of mileage out there in Central Park, and actually did the half. And this time I was able to run that half in 2:05, which I was like really proud of myself.
Big jump.
Yeah, a really big jump from 2:30. So that was really, really cool. And I think after that one, I remember being very emotional at the end of that one, because I just couldn't believe that I went from kind of, couch to half marathon in like 2 months, more or less, right? I That was the one where I finally was like just completely hooked and realized that I could actually do this. And so from that point on, I just signed up for literally every race that I could sign up for, because I got addicted to that finish line feeling. Like I realize, as I'm sure all of us experience, like there's very few highs that you'll experience that match that moment when you cross the finish line and you know that like all your weeks and months maybe of training have just culminated in this moment. Like so few things in our life have a finish line, right? Like, in my working life, there's never really a moment where I've like achieved, like, oh, you are the best data and analytics person ever. Like that doesn't happen.
Sure.
But like racing has that for us, where it's like, yes, you've crossed the line and you've done it in this time. It's so measurable and it's so rewarding in that regard. So I got really hooked.
Yeah, it's really easy to get hooked too. And I love the pipeline for you, from watching somebody finish a marathon to having your own finish line experience, and then it just all kind of took off from there. What do you think you did different? I know you followed like a plan of some sort in between the two marathon or half marathons, but what did you do different in training for that second half marathon that you think attributed to the time?
Yeah, I think, following the plan certainly helped, and just being really consistent. That is probably the number one thing that running has taught me, is just consistency wins over everything else. Um, Mostly because, you show up on race day, and I still have a lot of nerves, right? Like I have a 10K tomorrow that I run many, many times in Central Park. I know that course now. I could probably run it with my eyes closed. But you get like you have those nerves. Like there's excitement. It's an event, that you've been like thinking about. And I think the consistency helps you realize like, hey, I've done this a million times before. Like these miles are in my body. I'm just going to trust in my body, trust in the training. And so I think that just really helped a lot. Kind of separate out the fear from, the realization that I'm ready for this. Some part of me is ready for this, and I just need to like kind of let go of the nerves and just kind of trust in that. And then I think as well, the because of the consistency of running 3 times a week and getting those long miles in on the weekends, there's a domino effect of, well, now I don't feel so good when I wake up in the morning and I didn't eat well the night before and I need to go for like a 5-mile tempo run, right? And you're like, well, maybe I'll change my diet a little bit so that I feel better in these runs, and I'll do this. And oh man, I only slept like 5 hours last night. That was miserable. And so I need to really organize my life so that I can sleep at least 7 hours and ideally 8. And so you just start like, again, that domino effect that leads you to this moment where I've certainly felt now, that I've done a marathon, of my life is like unrecognizable to me in a very positive way compared to where it was when I first started.
Totally. I can relate to that as well. It's like life before marathon and then life after marathon. They're two completely different lifestyles. But it is really cool how, like you said, you like all of these things just go along with it. You start to almost subconsciously like change your life because you want running to be easier and more fun. So yeah, there's a lot that goes along with it. Cool. And then you started working through your 9+1 from there. Just kind of signed it up. You said like for everything and anything at that point, really hooked at that point. When did you start thinking about, I'm going to start training for the New York City Marathon?
Yeah, so I was doing the 9+1 in 2023 to run the 2024 one. So, and that honestly, let me tell you, that was difficult too because I'm not a patient person, and I was like mentally ready to run the marathon, and so the fact that I had to spend an entire almost literally 2 years before I could step foot on that course
Yeah.
was a challenge in itself. And I think that that is like a meta challenge about marathon training is that it will test your patience. Like even when you start a program, and in this case, I started a 16-week one, so I knew I was 4 months out from it. So it was kind of middle of summer that I began. Even then, like it will test your patience. Like you finish that first week, you're really excited. By the time you're in like like week 7, 8, like hitting that halfway mark, I don't know how it was for you, but you're just exhausted and you're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, how am I only halfway through this? How am
Yeah.
I going to do
Yeah.
this? What have I done to myself? Like, like my Instagram reels became all memes about marathon training and like what a like kind of a just a miserable time that can be, and you're like, wait, no, this is supposed to be really fun. Like all of everything in your head is like that finish line
Yes.
montage of people crossing and not the grueling hours of long runs and having your whole social calendar being blown up because like I was in bed at 9 o'clock on Fridays, and that was like a late like bedtime for me. In some mornings, because if I had like an 18-mile run, I was doing 8:30 p.m. bedtimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get up before the sun was too grueling and too punishing. So yeah, so I started 16 weeks out, and it was a very particularly humid summer in New York, so it was not the greatest of marathon trainings to start.
Yeah. Yeah, those fall marathons are sneaky like that, where especially for your first marathon, I don't know about you, but I did not calculate like, oh, fall marathon equals I have to train all summer. And the same thing when I trained for
No.
a spring marathon, I was like, oh, a spring marathon sounds better. Nope, you have to train in the dead of winter for the whole training
Yeah.
part. So just, things to consider when you're picking your first race. But I think that I'll ask you too, but I know for myself, like, though I remember those moments over the summer when things were really hard being to my benefit once I got to race day, because it was more than just a physical battle, like it was a mental battle the whole time. Did you feel
Yeah.
the same training through the summer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was definitely a mental battle. And I remember one run in particular, and there's like a New York City runs subreddit that I became a part of, which really helped. Like one piece of advice here is just like if you are running a marathon and you're in the training block, like find a group of people that are also going through it. Whether that's local or online, like I think that's one of the magic things about the internet is you can find people that are also doing this because there was a day where the humidity was like just off the charts. It was truly, I think, like the meter for dew point was like basically tropical.
Jeez.
It just felt swampy, right? And I had an 11-mile run that I needed to do that day. And, I did it in the city. I think this was one of the days where summer streets, so they closed down Park Avenue for most of Manhattan, which is delightful. So, it felt very kind of marathon-y because 4 lanes of traffic completely shut down to only bike and pedestrian traffic. And I got home that day and my wife was like, how'd it go? And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do 26. Like I had like basically a little bit of a mental breakdown because it was so punishing. And those 11 miles felt like 40 because of, just how hot it was, how, challenging the hydration was on it. And you're just thinking like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even do 11 today. How am I gonna add 15 more to that?
Yeah.
And so mentally, yeah, it was just like you drag on days like that, and it makes you question everything about your fitness, about your physique, about your mental toughness, and going online to that subreddit and seeing everyone else having that feeling of like this was one of the worst runs of my training block made me realize like it's okay to have that. It's okay to have those moments where you just kind of feel knocked down and defeated. The trick is just convincing yourself to get back up and convincing yourself that one bad run does not mean that you're not going to be able to complete, the full run. We're all going to have those runs. And that certainly wasn't the last one where I had, a lot of doubts after a long run of how I'm going to do it. But it comes back to the consistency. Like you just keep showing up. It's like this relentlessness that kind of happens of like I'm not giving up and I will keep running no matter how tired and awful I feel on some of these days.
Totally. Yeah, it's like you prove it to yourself, and I think once you get that bug, like you said, you get the bug of, oh, I'm going to continue to run races and chase these finish lines. It's like it makes the hard a little bit more worth it because you know that there's a result at the end. You might not know what finishing a marathon feels like, but you know what getting to a finish line feels like, and you can kind of visualize that and focus on it when you have those deeper
Totally.
runs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that that's the other thing that is really nice about the 9+1, to go back to an earlier question of yours, is that it does give you that race day experience. And I think that if you've not run a race in a while and you've signed up for a marathon or a half marathon, try to find a local 10K, a 4 mile, a 5K, anything at all, because it will get your body used to the morning of waking up for a race, like what to eat, when to use the bathroom, when to drink water, like all of those little things count a lot on marathon race day. And so I think just having that experience under my belt of doing many half marathons during my training blocks made it that much, it shrunk down a lot of the unknowns of race day for the big day. But yeah, the training block was an experience. I'm already looking forward to the calendar in a sense, with a little bit of excitement and a little bit of dread, because I just get to do it all over again. But we'll see how it goes.
For sure. Yeah, it's a little daunting, but yeah, once you're back into the swing of it, you're like, all right, we've been here before for marathon number 2. So it's definitely exciting. Cool. So we're working through the 9+1. When was the first time that you've got over the half marathon hump? Like when was that 14-mile run or 15-mile run or whenever that was?
Yeah, I think it must have been like 3 or 4 weeks into the marathon training block. So I think it was 4 or 5 weeks in. There was a run that was supposed to be 15 miles, and I had never done over 13. Give or take a mile or two, just because of like warm ups and stuff.
Sure.
And so yeah, there really is that mental like block and fear of I don't know what my body's going to do once I see 13:1 on my watch, and I realize I need to do another 2 miles. There's definitely like a moment of doubt, right, that creeps in, and fear. But what was really nice is I had done that day actually perfectly coincided with one of the New York City training runs that they do in Central Park. So it was a 12-mile run in Central Park, so 2 loops. And I had planned to literally just finish the 2 loops, cross the finish line, and then just keep on jogging to get the last 3. And so I did that, and I remember just feeling giddy, actually, because I hit that 13:1. I realized, I do like a lot of like mental self checks sometimes when I'm feeling like kind of tired or doubtful. I will literally go head to toe and I'm like, okay, head, how are we feeling? Neck, how are we feeling? And almost like having a conversation with my body parts. It sounds really
I
funny
love
to
that.
say, but
no, I like that. That's cool. Yeah.
yeah, because it forces you to take stock and truly like how are your muscles doing? And I think sometimes like your brain's trying to tell you that you're way more tired than you actually are.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I borrowed this from kind of yoga and meditation series of doing those like body scans. And so I made it all the way down to my feet and my ankles, as that's always where I end. And I'm like, everything's reporting it's great. Like I might have a little tightness here and there, but nothing is painful. And I also check in with my lungs. I'm like, my breathing is clear. It's okay. It's not that bad. And I thought, okay, I can do this. And I really, even telling you this story now, I get the same chills that I had at that moment, because I was just like, oh my gosh, this is happening. I'm crossing that mark, that into the unknown, so to speak. And so I hit 15 miles, and I remember texting my trainer that I've been working with now for 2 years. And I was just so excited to tell her that I'd gotten it, and she cheered me on. And I thought, okay, I can do this. Like that was a big moment for me, for sure.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's so interesting. The body scans I knew from yoga, but I had never even thought about doing that in a running sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, like, I don't want to get like too off track from your story, but I'm curious, when you do a body scan and you have a moment of, okay, this hurts, or this isn't going well, or this is uncomfortable. Like, what do you do then? What does that prompt you to do?
Yeah, so I actually did have a scenario where I was running a long run and needed to just call it off. And in fact, at some point during the training block, I think I was in my week 8 or 9, I had to take 4 weeks off because of an IT band injury, which was a whole thing, and we can talk about that in a moment. But because taking 4 weeks off, 16-week program during like peak mileage is crazy. But Yeah, I had one run where, I think I was supposed to do 15 or 16, or sorry, 16 or 17. I think I got to mile like 13 or 14 and just started to feel something not right.
Mm,
And there's a difference, right, between just like, oh, this is a little tired versus nope, like if I keep going, I'm going to hurt myself. And so I kind of just decided to just end it and kind of walk back home and, did some little bit of like recovery work, some PT work with my trainer, thought everything was okay. And then I had an 18-mile run coming up. So I did the 18-mile run. And unfortunately, at the end of that one, something really did go wrong. As I
mm,
mentioned, I basically had just done something to my IT band, and my right knee was almost unusable, right? Unfortunately, like I couldn't really put a lot of pressure on it. Certainly any kind of twisting motion on it. Like it didn't bear a lot of weight. And I had to get, an MRI done just to make sure that there was no tear. Thankfully, there wasn't.
mm.
So this was just a very much kind of like rest and wait and see. And so there was a lot of anxiety, as you can imagine, for me of like I'm supposed to be knocking out miles 19, 20, and then a taper, and then like getting back. All of
Yeah.
these miles just went by, ticking by, ticking by, ticking by, and I was logging 0, 0, 0, 0 week after week. Um, and so I, thankfully still strength trained and did a lot of recovery and PT work, working both with my trainer and now my sports doc. But I was like, oh my gosh, now I really don't know if I'm going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And I wish I had listened more probably to my body earlier in the training cycle because the largest lesson I learned is like you have a training plan, but be okay changing that plan. And I think I was ignoring some of the signs that I was overtraining and that I was ramping my mileage too fast, and that I probably picked like too aggressive of a 16-week plan because
Mm,
I think I'd gone with like an intermediate or intermediate advanced somewhere in the middle when I probably should have just picked a beginner. Like yes, I had done some
right.
halves and everything, but I think I really underestimated the toll that a marathon training block has on your body. And so, yeah, I think I should have just started to cut back on some of the mileage and cut back on some of the runs and was ignoring some of the signals because I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And as a result, I ended up hurting myself quite literally in this case and having to take that time off.
Totally. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that was like, yeah, peak time for you. And I think this is a good time to kind of bring up that all or nothing mindset. I've talked about it a little bit on the show, but I think for your first marathon, it's so important to look at your training runs in how do I want to say it? Like you want to make sure that you don't work your way into an all or nothing mindset, meaning like, oh, if I miss this one run, I can't run this marathon. Because
Right.
sometimes the returns on taking a step back and making sure you check in with yourself if something doesn't feel right, and maybe taking a couple of days off just to see if anything changes could be the difference maker between you being able to run the marathon and you being not able to run the marathon. And I know it came up maybe a little bit later for you. You said that you pushed through maybe more than you would have loved, but good that you ended up catching it before it was like a tear or something serious where you were completely out from the marathon.
Totally. Yeah. No, I remember yeah. So, my long runs were on Saturday and it was a Tuesday. I was supposed to be right back out there again because I was doing like Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, basically. So 4 days a week. And yeah, I woke up that Tuesday and was like, no, like something still does not feel right. Like this is more than just like, oh, it is a little stiff or a little tight. And I'm really grateful that my trainer immediately referred me to her sports doctor. And so I was able to kind of start that whole journey, that medical journey. It's my first MRI I've ever received. And so that was a trip.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I now know, and it's honestly to your point, it's like a lesson I keep having to teach myself of it is better to miss even a week of training than it is to hurt yourself and miss the entire block or miss months of training or God forbid, like completely remove yourself from running because of like some kind of, irreversible damage. So I,
Totally.
I'm very much now a proponent of like skip the run. If something is just telling you like that it's a push, skip the run, definitely.
Totally. Yeah, my favorite graphic is like, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like all of the runs in your training block and then all of the runs minus the 4 that you didn't run. And the point is the pictures look pretty much exactly the same.
The
So
same.
it's definitely listen to yourself. It's not going to make or break, especially your first marathon. Like your first marathon, you're going to PR no matter what. So whether you have
Right.
aggressive goals or not, like just take the time and make sure you get to the finish or the finish line for sure. But cool. So that had to be taxing on you mentally. How were you feeling mentally through that time where you had to take a step back and you were missing those like 18, 19, 20-mile runs?
Yeah, again, just a lot of anxiety, a lot of, not depression, but certainly down on myself, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh man, I've messed everything up, and I've been working for this for 2 years, and I'm gonna miss the start line. It gave me a very deep appreciation for one of the, I think the race director at New York Roadrunners always celebrates everyone making it to the start as part of his like preamble before we they sound the gun and we go off. And I never really like paid much attention to that. I was like, well, that's a weird thing. Like, of course, like who cares about being at the start line? And now I got it right. I was like, right, like getting to the start line itself is like a little miracle of miracles because of all the things that can take you out of getting there, even down to just getting the flu randomly the week of your race, right?
Yeah.
Like all these things we can't control. So I really began to appreciate just how special it is to even just make it to the start. And even if you don't cross the finish line, you've done something amazing just by getting there. And so I try to really have that attitude of like focus on recovery. No matter what happens the day of, if I need to bail at mile 13, like that's okay. Like this is not going to define me for the rest of my life. And just really trying to have a lot of like positive self-talk. My trainer was a huge help. My wife was a huge help. I bought gifts for both of them at the end of my marathon because I just felt like, oh my gosh, like I could not have done it without their support. And I feel like I've certainly taxed them with all of my like, kind of anxiety and questioning, like, please tell me I can do this. Like, are you sure I can do this? And they're like,
Yeah.
yes, you'll be able to. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely. Cool. So yeah, I mean, definitely thank your people around you because they go through it just as much as you do.
yes,
If not more in some cases when we're really down on ourselves. So definitely a good point. And then so we worked our way out of obviously being in training. And how much did you have, or I'm sorry, going through an injury, and how much of training did you have left before your marathon, or were you coming right off and going straight to race day?
yeah, I had 3 weeks.
Okay.
So, it was kind of funny. I had to squeeze a ramp up and a taper all into three
Yeah,
weeks.
that's so interesting. Yeah.
So I think like week 1 was a ramp up, week 2 was like a quote unquote peak, and then week 3 was a mini taper.
Gotcha.
And so my trainer again really helped me with adjusting the schedules and figuring out like what mileage I should do and when. And so I worked my way back up to a 12 miler. That was like the longest that I was going to do, and then kind of worked my way back down. And that last week I only logged maybe like 6 miles in total, like maybe a 2 or a 3 miles, something like that. And similar to a lot of other people, I remember especially that last week where it's almost like you feel like you've forgotten how to run, like you there's just so much, you're so in your head about it. And so I was like, I don't even like my heart rate was terrible on this like 3 mile run. My legs felt awful. I was really nervous. I was wearing a brace on my leg. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this might be the worst thing I've ever done.
Sure.
But I really, again, just try to trust in all the training, trust in everyone around me, and also give myself the space that if I needed to bow out, I could, and that would be okay. And I think that giving myself that mental space, going back to that all or nothing, trying to eliminate that of like, it's okay if you DNF on a marathon. No one thinks less of you.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, especially a race
yeah,
like New York, the experience in itself,
right.
even if you get to experience a fraction of it, is so cool. So, um, yeah. So let's talk about kind of leading up to race day. I know you were living in New York, so what was the like any logistics that you had to deal with to get to the start line? I know New York can be a little bit chaotic. What was the experience like?
Yeah, for me, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to sleep the night before anyway because of how excited and anxious I was going to be. So I signed up for literally one of the earliest buses out of Midtown. I think like the 5 or 5:30 a.m. I think I did 5:30. I ended up getting there earlier and they didn't care. So I got on a bus at like 5:15 in the morning or something. So I was awake at 3:30, doing the exact same pre-race routine I've always done, which was like peanut butter jelly sandwich, a little bit of coffee, a little bit of water. And in this case,
Dialed.
because yeah, totally dialed in. Yeah. And that again gave me comfort. I was like, been here before. I know how
Yeah.
to do it. And obviously since it was the full, I also was packing my bag or, making sure I had everything. I'd written out a checklist because that also really helps. You don't want to, miss anything just because you're kind of frenzied. But yeah, I made my way to Midtown, got on that Midtown bus. I arrived at the start village around, I think, 7 a.m. And my start time wasn't until, sorry, no, it was way earlier. It was like 6:30,
Mm.
or 6:15. And, start time wasn't until 9:45 or 10, I believe. So I was like wave three. Um, and so I had a bit of time on my hands. I had at least 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours before I was actually going to kick off. But I actually look back at that time very fondly now because it was so peaceful because everyone is just like listening to music and just sitting around and milling about, and it was cold. I really underestimated just how cold it would be that morning because you're not moving and you don't want to move because you're really just trying to conserve, conserve, conserve. And so for this next year, I'm going to bring way more throwaway layers or giveaway layers rather, and be more prepared about that. But I met a very nice runner next to me, who his corral was way earlier than mine. And so he lent me his heat shield, which was really
Oh,
nice
that's
of him.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like, "Hey, I'm done with this. You take it." And I'm very grateful to him for that because that really helped me. But yes, so race day logistics, just took the bus, and I really liked that option because I didn't want to think about the two-step of getting all the way down to the ferry and then taking the ferry to the other station and then a bus to the start. I
It's
was
a
like, just
lot.
put me on an early bus, get me there, I'll be fine. So
So not too bad. Besides,
not too bad.
I think everybody has to deal with that, like sitting around for a couple of hours thing with any of the world majors. But yeah, logistically, it doesn't sound like it was too bad. And once you got to your start line, you're lining up in your corral, getting ready to start. How were you feeling? Nerves? Exciting? Like what was going through your head?
Yeah, I was a ball of emotions. Like I would go from being really excited to feeling like I was gonna like happy cry already. I was
Mm,
texting my friends and family, and everyone was texting me really encouraging things. It really is. It's like one of the best days of the year. I think it's a really special moment. I always tell people in my life like humanity has obviously both light and dark, and I think things like marathons and half marathons and just races it really show the light in us because it's just this moment where like we all just come to support each other following our own dreams. And so like it was just this magical little moment that again just lives in my head rent free now of getting all these encouraging messages and feeling just that energy around you, right? Like the corral energy is unmatched. That mix of excitement and nerves and all that. But I was doing, my head to toe scans. Like my knee actually miraculously felt really good that day. I had brought a brace with me just in case, but I decided I didn't need it, so I put that in the donation pile as well. And had all my basically like you are feel like a little mule with all your gels and gummies and
yeah.
everything like stuffed into all your pockets. And I will say what was really funny is like we started off and in that first not even mile, right, you're running the Verrazano Bridge, there were some firefighters there who were on the sidelines cheering people on. And I had worn my name on my shirt, like I just duct taped and written my name on. And as I ran by, it was the first moment where someone was like, "Yeah, go Sam, you got this." And I was like, "Wait, how do they know who I am?" Because I'd completely forgotten that I put my name on my shirt.
Yeah.
And so that was like that first magical moment of like, oh, this is going to be so fun because it was 26 miles of people shouting my name out and
Yeah.
cheering for me.
What else could you ask for? Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
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 that
it was really special. Yeah, and so I do recommend that. Like if it's your first one, especially, put your name on your shirt. Like it's such a riot.
yeah, so fun. Cool. Well, yeah, let's break down more of the race. So, I guess I'll let you decide. Like, what did you have a strategy of, oh, I'm gonna focus on the first 10 miles, second 10 miles, last 10K, or we split it in half? Like, how were you thinking about the race?
Yeah, so I did this funny thing in all my training blocks with for some reason I decided that every long run was broken down into 7 parts. I don't know why, but 7 just made sense to me. I think because it gave me a sense of like there wasn't too few where you felt like you were in a stretch for a very long time, but it wasn't so many that you couldn't like get around it. I
Mm-hmm.
think looking back, 7 might be too many for the marathon because I had broken it down literally like, okay, first part is like the bridge. Second part is going to be like Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. Third part is the other bridge, Queensboro. And I'd done this part where I was like, I just need to get through the 7 parts, same as before. But it was too many, and it all went out the window when I hit the wall at mile 19 anyway.
Sure.
So I think this next year I will probably go the 10-10-10 route because I think that does feel just so much more accessible,
Totally.
and kind of helps you, yeah, like mentally break it down. So that is one thing I learned. 7 is too many.
Yeah, but at least you were thinking like, "Oh, I'm gonna do some runner's math here. I'm gonna break this into pieces a little bit so that
Exactly.
like it's not this whole big thing." But yeah, how were
Right.
you feeling like when you hit the half marathon part? That was all charted territory for you. So how did you feel for the first half?
Yeah, really well actually. It was great. Pace was good. I felt comfortable with where I was. I was so excited again. Just like the energy in Brooklyn was insane. Yeah, especially like just parts of it where you're like in a little shoot of people, right? And you've got crowds on either side of you. Like you're high fiving. You could stick both arms out and high five two people at the same time.
Oh, so
Like you're
cool.
so close. And so that was just electric and it made those miles tick by. So we went over that small bridge, into Queens at 13.1. And I thought, okay, like I'm doing it. I'm halfway. Like I can do this, just halfway to go. And but as people on, have said and signs will say, like the race doesn't actually start till Queensboro Bridge. I really believe that now because that bridge, which I had run many times in my training blocks, still like you're not prepared for what it does to your body and the tax that it tolls on you, especially when you're now 15 miles deep into the race. So 13 felt really good. 15 started to get a little wobbly for sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So if you said so 15 was the first time you were starting to feel like, okay, this is a marathon that we're running here. uh,
Right.
uh,
Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah. So sorry. So coming off of 15, heard the wall of sound, became really emotional again because, like, the bridge is silent. And I heard everyone on First Avenue just cheering. I literally almost started crying again. I almost cried for most of the marathon
mhm.
um, because I was just so excited to be around people. And I knew also my wife and my friends were going to be waiting around mile 18 or 19 on First Ave. So I was really excited to see them too. And the thought of seeing her also made me really emotional because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see her. Like I needed her like energy at that point because
Yeah.
like I said, I did start to just kind of feel a little run down.
Totally. Yeah, spectators are huge in your family. It gives you something to look forward to. And this is something I would
Yeah.
recommend for anybody who's thinking about running their first marathon that has support that's coming with you. Strategically put them in the miles that you know that you're going to struggle. I know for you, like
Yes.
you didn't get the like 18, 19 miles ahead of time, but like, yeah, if you know during training that you have miles where typically you hit the wall or you have a hard time mentally, put your family there because they're going to pull you through so much more than you think for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm really grateful that they were where they were because like I said, mile 19, I was like, "Oh, this is the wall. Okay, I understand now." So
Yeah, what did that
seeing
feel like
her,
for the first time? The hitting the
it
wall?
was yeah, it was unbelievable. And I think the universe was really trying to teach me a lesson because I remember going through training and everything and, again, fueling, and like I learned about fueling on these long runs and also from half marathons. And I thought, I'll be fine. Like, not everyone needs to hit the wall. It's not a big deal. And I absolutely just hit it. The universe was like, haha, here you go. Like, experience this for yourself because you were not really prepared. I think I was a little underfueled. I wasn't as diligent because you're like distracted, the
Yeah.
energy's high with all the spectators, so I wasn't as good about taking a gel every 45 minutes. And so yeah, I just like all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I need to walk, like I need to stop. And the other thing that had happened now that I'm remembering is my doctor had told me, he's like, okay, after the IT band injury, I kept seeing him. I saw him, a couple days before the race, and he's like, whatever you do, just don't stop. Because what will happen is that once you stop, like it's going to start to tighten again, and you
Yeah.
may not be able to restart. And so I didn't know if he meant like don't stop, or like don't stop to walk. And
Mm,
so for a couple of miles, I really was afraid that if I let myself walk, then I wasn't going to be able to finish. And finally, I was like, I just have to. I don't know what's going to happen, but I really need to walk. I'm bonking really hard. And so I allowed myself to walk. It was okay, nothing like tightened, so that gave me a little bit of relaxation. I was texting my friends and my family, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And they were like, you've got this. It's okay. We see lots of people walking. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. And, I basically just was like, that's okay. I'm walking. I'm just going to walk until even if I walk the last 7 miles, like I can do that. I know I can do that. And I just started to tell myself again that left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, just keep moving forward. I got some gels. I drank some water. Um, I let myself like come back to the crowd because I realized that I had gone deeply internal. Like
Mm.
I didn't even feel like I was part of this race course anymore, because I felt like, again, like everything just blackened around me, and you just start to look like your brain is just like, you got to stop, you got to stop, you got to stop. And I started to do that check-in, but this time, rather than doing like a body check-in, it was like a environment check-in. Like, hey, you are here, you're moving forward, it's okay, like you're gonna be able to cross, you've got more friends and family coming up, like you're so close to the finish. and
Yeah.
and just allowing myself to kind of reset. And I realized, once I hit mile, I think 20, so I walked for about a mile and a half, maybe two. I started to feel like I could jog a little bit, I could run a little bit here and there. So I finished the race, the last like 6 miles at that point, doing, a minute or two of running, minute or two of walking, minute or two of running, minute or two of walking. And knowing that the very last part, when you enter Central Park, I wanted to run it. But I was like, that's the plan. So just run until you feel like you need to walk, and then run again. And that is how I just kind of I did it. And at this point, truly, the emotions were like just a dam about to burst, right? Because the closer I got, the more I realized I was going to do it, and I couldn't believe that it was actually happening. It was really special.
Totally. Yeah, it's such a hard feeling to put into words. I
It
I
is.
don't think we even could. Like, you just have to experience it for yourself for the first time, especially, of that feeling of like, oh my God, I made it. Oh, pretty much. I'm right here. I'm gonna
Right.
turn this corner and it's gonna be right there. It's like, oh, I get chills even talking about it or thinking about it every single time.
Same.
Um, yeah, so we made it. We made it to the finish line. Obviously, well, hopefully you saw your family as well. How did it feel? Like, what was the finish line feeling like for you?
Yeah. Oh, same as you. I get chills every time I think about that, because, I came off of Central Park South. I knew I wanted to run the last little bit, so I ran the last little bit. In my head, I was like flying. Like you just feel like I can do this. Like I'm feeling so good. All of a sudden, you find this like this well of energy you didn't even realize you had. I think my pace was like 13-minute jog. Like I was just like running so slow at that
Cruising.
point, but you feel like you're flying.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I crossed the finish line. Hands up, like the iconic, like, fist pump in the air, so excited. And that first couple of moments, I think it was like disbelief and relief. And I just started to kind of choke up, and almost just broke down bawling, to be honest. Like it was this moment of truly, 2 years of work and of thinking about it and obsessing about it and changing your whole life around this. And all of the people in your life that supported you every step of the way. And you realize, like, running is both a solo sport and not a solo sport, because of all those people that helped you get there. And they put the medal around my neck, and truly I broke down. Like I just I couldn't hold it all in anymore. And I was also shocked by how heavy the medal is. Like, you don't appreciate it. But yeah, I got the medal. I got my the cape that they throw on you, and just kind of walked home and saw my wife at the exit. And yeah, it was just a magical feeling. Like you said, it's really hard to describe, but it really is just that, what a magical sensation of putting, really having everything you've done materialize into 1 second of this, like, moment you cross, is really rare in life, and unmatched, in my opinion. So I know a lot of people cross the finish line and think like, oh, I'm never doing that again. I was like the complete opposite. I was like, I can't wait for round two. Let's go again.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. People do fit into those two categories. It's like, yep, let's run it back right away. Or it's like, nah, yeah, that's the
exactly.
end of the road for me. But that's amazing. So yeah. And we talked about in the beginning about how, like, the marathon, you have your personality or your how you feel about yourself before you run the marathon, and then you kind of have how you come out of the marathon. How do you feel like you came out of that marathon as a person?
Yeah, I went to journal at some point, maybe the next day after all the celebrations and everything, and opened up my journal. I'm really big into journaling, so it was like a moment for me to do that. And all I ended up writing on that day was, I can do hard things. And I come back to that all the time. I mean, it's like it's a kind of a cliched statement we see a lot, but like it just had so much more meaning to me suddenly, because I had that realization of, like, running a marathon is hard, like, and even running a half marathon is hard. Doing any of these things that you willingly sign yourself up to do is a hard thing. And I think, you find in yourself these moments of courage, and that you didn't even know you had, an energy that you didn't know you have, and it culminates in this finish, and you realize, like, wow, like, what else can I do? And I think that was like the really big moment in my life, of this realization of, wow, I set a goal, I showed up all throughout that goal, I met the goal, and now I'm like, what's my next goal? Like, what else can you throw at me that I am going to find a way to do? And so that was both for really big life changes of, even restarting this podcast that I have, the Super Awesome Runner, and like getting back into it because I'd taken a little bit of a hiatus, to little things of like, I think I had a joke on my Threads account at some point where it's like, I've run a marathon, I can put away the dishes after dinner. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like all these little things that you realize, like, okay, yeah, I'm way less tired now than I was then, and look what I did then. So like I have the energy to do these little things. So that has been a really life-changing thing that I just continue to come back to, and hope to for the rest of my life.
Totally. I love that. Like, yeah, it like puts everything in perspective. The dishes, I know, like that's an awesome joke. I love it. But it's so small scale, but it's so true. It's like, gosh, if I can do this really hard thing, everything in my life feels simple now. Like everything feels obtainable, something that I can tackle or I can work my way through. I love that. I love that you can compare like the big goal to something so small like that and say, no, nah, like I can do this thing because I can do something like that. Super cool.
Exactly. Yeah. I think for me, as a spin instructor, I would say this all the time, but like the mind that you use in a spin class, or in an exercise, or in a run, is the same mind that you're going to use for every other application out there.
Totally.
Like, they are not two separate brains. And so like you have that realization of, when you push yourself and do something surprising, fitness wise, you can absolutely push yourself and do something surprising, with another goal, whether that's professional, whether it's personal, whatever that might be. But those two minds are the exact same. So you can certainly surprise yourself, both physically and also mentally.
Totally. Yeah, and I know that I meant to get to it a little bit sooner in the podcast, like how you got into the podcast, your own podcast and everything, but I know the mental aspect of running is something that's really fascinating too. Do you want to talk about kind of like your podcast a little bit, what the concept is, what topics you typically hit on, that kind of thing?
Sure, yeah. So it's called Super Awesome Runner. The name comes from the fact that my friend and I started a mixtape podcast called Super Awesome Mix, back in 2020, during the start of COVID. We were both kind of looking for a project, and that's been a lot of fun. That's grown a lot. And so I kind of did a little spinoff called Super Awesome Runner, which is really just this mix of, that the kind of joy of movement, with my interest in neurobiology and psychology, and the why of it all. Like, why do we do the things that we do? How does our brain work? Why do we have a wall, kind of that we hit, and so my weekly show now just kind of uses running as like a vehicle to discuss that relationship that we have with ourselves, and the kind of mental fortitude that we can show through running, and how do we apply that to other parts in our life. So that's been a really fun thing to, take something as seemingly so simple as running, and realize that it's actually quite complex, and that we have a lot of systems at play underneath that help us do the things that we do on everything from a normal daily run to these big races in our life. That there's just like a lot of magic underneath the hood. So that is my show, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's been great connecting with other runners on Threads and on Instagram, and again, just tapping into this amazing community of people, and even how I discovered your podcast, and how fun it's been to record this right now. So it's a lot of fun, and I think, just being in that space is something that I find really interesting.
Yeah, I find it super interesting too. I was doing a little bit of a deep dive, probably super creepy, on all of your episodes before we filmed today. But it's really interesting, and definitely go check it out. I think we're planning on doing some sort of collab pretty soon, so
Yeah.
I'll be over there as well. But definitely check it out. Cool. So yeah, just to kind of wrap things up here, just a few finishing questions that are just more fun questions, more topical questions, but
Sure.
About fuel and shoes. So I always give the disclaimer: fuel is your own journey, shoes are your own journey. Go get your own feet measured, try out everything and anything when it comes to fuel for yourself. But for you, what do you like for fuel, or what have you liked over your time running?
Yeah, I started off with the SIS ones because that was what New York Roadrunners had, and this was again before I really knew what I was doing. So I started with those. Those kind of didn't work for me, and I made my way eventually to honey stinkers, and really really liked the honey stinker. I started with the gummies because that felt more accessible to me than gels, because like gels just kind of freaked me out for a while. But then I realized that it became not practical to eat gummies sometimes while you were running because you can very easily choke, as I learned. So I was like, okay, fine, gels, you win. So the honey stinger ones, I do a mix between the straight honey, no caffeine, with like the kind of berry mixes that have caffeine, and so I alternate those, and those have been really great for me.
I really like those too. I'm a little biased to honey stinger, but those are my favorite too. They're like,
Nice,
if you don't like the texture of goo, like typical, like the goo brand, the
right?
honey stinger stuff is honey. Like for me mentally, I can down honey better than I can down like
Totally
something artificial that I don't understand. So really love honey stinger for sure. And
nice.
then what about shoes? What have you like for shoes?
Yeah, I'm like deep in the Nike camp for shoes.
Oh, cool.
I've like run with Nike for most of my life, and just found some shoes that again don't give me shin splints, don't give me injuries really. I can log long miles on them and be totally fine. So my race day shoe right now is the Alpha Fly 3. I ran the marathon in the Vaporfly 3 because I hadn't yet bought the Alpha Fly. And now my dailies are the new Zoom Fly 6, which I really like because it's kind of that midpoint between like a really nice daily trainer and a like race day super shoe since it has the carbon plate. But that's been a blast to run in. Like I just really like I like the feel of these shoes. They all kind of look the same when you line them up, right? The Zoomfly, Alpha Fly, and Vaporfly. They just have like a cool little like rocking motion when you stand in them. You know, you just feel like you want to run in them.
Yeah.
So those have been my shoes right now.
Cool. Love it. Sweet. And then last question is just what's coming up next for you? I know you said that you're thinking about running your second marathon. I don't know if you've said if you like have announced a second marathon or anything yet, but what's keeping you busy right now?
Yeah, so doing the 9+1 again, and I have the this year actually I'm running both the New York City half and the Brooklyn half.
Nice.
So I've got those coming up, which is going to be a lot of fun. I'm not going to try for a PR on the New York City one, but I do want to PR on the Brooklyn one because I ran that one 2 years ago and was totally defeated by it. So this time I'm ready to take it back on. And then I will be running the 2025 New York City Marathon again.
Sweet.
You know, hopefully, right? Like you never know what's going to happen, but I will be signing up to run to do it, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Cool. Well, excited to see your training and everything, and hopefully you document a lot of your journey so people can follow along with you too. And if
For
anybody
sure.
does want to follow along, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm most active these days on Threads at Super Awesome Runner, but you can also find me on Instagram under the same handle as well. And I'll be both of those places just talking about my journey and all the highs and lows of it all.
Amazing. Cool. Well, I'll link everything as well, and be on the lookout for my episode over on his podcast as well. Obviously, that's going to be coming soon. I'll be posting about it on my socials. I'm sure you will as well. But thank you so
Sure.
much again for coming on and telling your story. This was awesome. No pun intended.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Right. This was super awesome.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. If you're enjoying My First Marathon, it would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the show. And if you or someone you know has ran a marathon and would like to share your story, I have a guest form to fill out in my bio on Instagram. That username is @MyFirstMarathonPod. See you on the next one.